Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on Crystal Maiden, a hero for QTGFs. Crystal Maiden is a ranged intelligence support hero whose most iconic feature is being built out of wet paper towels. She has one of the lowest effective HP pools of any hero in the game, and she's slow as shit, making her incredibly easy to kill. However, she needs that handicap because all of her spells are absolutely insane. Crystal Nova is an AoE attack and movement speed slow that is so big you can cast it in front of you to hit heroes behind you. Frostbite is a unit target root that lasts a goddamn century and also deals a massive amount of bonus damage to creeps, including those summoned by the enemy team. Arcane Aura is a global aura that grants a limited amount of mana regen to every hero on the map and bonus mana regen to any heroes near you. It's bottlenecked by the fact that it is only active while you are alive, which is going to be less time than you probably are imagining. Lastly, Freezing Field is her ultimate, which causes magic damage to spawn around her in a massive AoE, and it involves one of the most complicated math equations in the entire game to determine what damage happens and where. She also has a fifth ability in her Aghanim Shard. This gives her Wave Dash. I do not know what this ability is actually called. I have always referred to it as Wave Dash. Everyone always knows what I'm talking about, so I have no incentive to learn. All of these amazing spells, once again, are balanced by the fact that Crystal Maiden is a weak little bitch and is very easy to kill. Now, I've talked a bit about all of these spells individually, but when combined on the character, they turn Crystal Maiden into effectively a perfect support. She has access to pretty much every tool you could ask for except for healing, but even then, with the right facet, you have some defensive capabilities. However, if you see Crystal Maiden picked on your team, you're not thinking about her Q or her W, you're thinking about that E. Arcane Aura grants a Ring of Basilius and change worth mana regen to you and all of your friendly heroes on the map, regardless of where you are. This means that if you're picking a mana-hungry hero or someone with issues in the mid-game, like a Viper or an Axe, you no longer have to worry about mana. Meanwhile, if you're a carry and you're laning with Crystal Maiden, if you would be going something like a Null Tally or a Falcon Blade, you can just skip it now. You're going to have plenty of mana regen throughout the game, and in the lane, you're going to have enough to cast spells pretty much as often as you want. Back in the day, it wasn't completely uncommon to see Crystal Maiden put 4 points in her E before getting a level 2 in either of her other spells. Today, that's trolling, but you can do it if you want and then claim you haven't played in 5 years. Now, once you're in that lane with Crystal Maiden, you're going to be very pleased to know that both of her spells have unique applications within it. Frostbite, for example, deals a metric ton of damage to creeps whenever it hits, so if you're playing against a Chen or an Enchantress or a Beastmaster or something like that, they can kiss their creeps goodbye. It's also just a very long route, so if you're a hero that needs a little bit of setup to make the most of your abilities, CM has you covered. Her Q is probably her least standout spell, but it's also really good because the AoE is so large that it's very easy to hit both enemy laners and secure a range creep all in a single cast. Lastly, her ultimate is kind of completely antithetical to the hero's identity, but that's okay. What it requires is for Crystal Maiden to walk up in the middle of multiple heroes, hit the R button, and then stand still while somehow not dying or getting stunned. This is very difficult, but if you manage to pull off this absolute miracle, you are rewarded with an insane amount of magic damage that scales shockingly well into the late game. Now earlier I talked about how squishy this girl is, and trust me, she's very squishy, but that's not the only problem that she has to deal with. Crystal Maiden is also very stupid. She has a very low max mana pool and her int gain leaves a lot to be desired. This actually makes it pretty difficult to spam her spells, and it's not uncommon to see Crystal Maiden walk up to the lane with multiple mangoes and buy more a few minutes in. This puts CM in a very weird position where, while she is very easy to play, actually managing your mana can be difficult, and will make the difference between a bad CM and a good CM. That, and if they end the game with 8 deaths or 15. Speaking of those deaths, let's talk a little bit about how she has glass bones and paper skin. Crystal Maiden begins the game of Dota 2 with 494 HP and 2 armor. This makes her incredibly juicy bait for first blood plays, and if it weren't for Frostbite, I'm pretty sure she would lose a man fight with every single hero in the entire game. This problem is not something that goes away with levels, by the way. She has a paltry 2.2 strength gain and 1.8 agi gain, meaning that both HP and armor are very hard to come by. To make matters worse, you will also be dedicating a good chunk of your item build not to solving your tankiness problems, but instead to solving your mana issues. Luckily, there are a small handful of items that can deal with both at the same time. If you are going to start playing Crystal Maiden, you must make peace with the idea that you're going to have a considerable amount of deaths for the majority of your games, and you're going to spend a good chunk of them running away from heroes just to die anyway. This is because Crystal Maiden also has 280 base move speed, which, against the majority of the cast, rounds down to 0. They are going to catch you. They are going to kill you. You have to be okay with this. Notably, however, no matter how well you play or how PMA you are over comms, your team will never be okay with it. Because if you're dead, they're not getting their free mana. And if they're not getting their free mana, what the hell are you even here for? Now, if you're comfortable with the idea of having the tank of a Skywrath Mage and the mana pool of a Sven, here's how to play Crystal Maiden. First off, try to pair up with a carry that has some kill potential. It doesn't have to be a Chaos Knight or a Juggernaut, it can be a Phantom Assassin, but you don't want to pair up with a Spectre. This is because Arcane Aura will allow them to spam their spells much more effectively than normal, and your own spells will keep the position 4 in place for your pause 1 to wail on them. You're going to spend the bulk of the lane trying to land really good Crystal Novas on both enemy heroes, or using it to secure range creeps, and trying to manage the jungle camps as well as you can. Crystal Maiden's body is very bad, which means that she's not very good at body blocking. For example, if a Clockwork even notices your existence, you immediately have to begin running, because he is way faster than you, will murder you, and has no qualms about chasing you to the edge of the tier 2 tower. Try to position yourself as conservatively as you can while still being in range to cast your spells and getting off your pathetic little right clicks every now and again. Trust me, they do add up over time. Oh, and if you ever deny a range creep with a Crystal Maiden right click, spam a taunt, voice line, anything, really rub it in. I mean, seriously, that's just pathetic. Try to communicate with your position 1 and set up kill opportunities. What you don't want to do is spend all of your mana just on casual harassment. If you're going to be using both your Q and your W, you want to make your carry get a kill out of it. And also, if you are playing against a Beastmaster, Ench, or another creep-oriented hero, bring mangoes, pop them, hit W on the creeps whenever he spawns them. Is it effective? Maybe. But it will make him really mad. If he ever begins complaining about it in all chat, consider your mission accomplished. Heading into the mid-game, your positioning is going to be the number one thing to keep an eye on. Remember, you are squishy as shit, so you are not in a position to tank right-clicks or spells from the enemy heroes. If the enemy team ever goes on you, make sure to open your shop and buy as many sentries as quickly as you can before they inevitably send you to your maker. Now, as far as your item builds go, there's effectively two different philosophies with Crystal Maiden. The first is a kind baby strat, where you stack defensive items like Force Staff, Glimmer Cape, maybe a Yule Scepter depending on the matchup, etc., and you use it to either keep yourself alive or save your teammates. The second option is Evil Baby, where you focus entirely on your ultimate and using it to win teamfights in the late game. This is a much more selfish version of Crystal Maiden that relies on Blink Dagger, Aghanims, and BKB. If your team ever complains about you going these items, simply point out how many levels you have in Arcane Aura to remind them that their spells are actually your spells. Plan B is to open up team chat and type, "I'm literally just a girl," and hit enter, then mute everyone. Now, regardless of which way you choose to be born, your ultimate is a very high impact spell and you're going to have to make good use of it. If you have maneuverability tools, you can do things like going up to the ward spot and casting it there so they can't mess with you, or hiding in the trees and using the massive AoE to your advantage. Lastly, a note about her facets. Glacial Guard makes it so that her Q grants a physical damage barrier to any allied heroes hit by the ability, including an increased amount for Crystal Maiden herself. This is the default, it's the one you're going to go in the majority of the games, and you can cast it on yourself before you use ultimate to make yourself slightly less shitty. Her second facet, Arcane Overflow, allows Crystal Maiden to go Super Saiyan, and makes all of her spells insanely broken. The downside for this is that it increases all of the mana costs by 50%, meaning that in order to use this and your ultimate, it will cost you 900 mana. However, I do think that it is criminally underexplored in Turbo. If you're going to be being an evil baby with 3 times the XP and net worth, you should absolutely give it a try. Otherwise, stick with Glacial Guard. One more note about her ultimate. If you're ever curious for how the Frost Novas determine themselves to exist, this is what I found on the wiki. It uses a quadrant system, and then it cycles through it, but then there's RNG within the quadrants, and then there's all this interval stuff. It's not that complicated, but like, look at this shit. It looks like a calculus exam note sheet. I just, what is this? What is this? I used to know all this, by the way. I used to be a Crystal Maiden spammer. I had all of this memorized. Never again. I'm never putting that much effort into any individual hero in this game for the rest of my life. But if you do want to win TI someday, go ahead and memorize this. I'm sure it'll help you out. I wrote a little bit about how supports have access to a lot more golden experience and how that affects the game from the point of view of a carry. Feel free to read it if you like. And if you're having problems with Crystal Maiden, here's how to kill her even faster. First off, be aggressive. Crystal Maiden cannot run away. Outside of using some of her spells and defensive capabilities, which requires that she face you, she doesn't really have a whole lot of options. As a result, if you can get a Blink Dagger, Force Staff yourself onto her, any kind of gap close, there's a good chance she's going to die. This is especially true if you have some kind of debuff immunity or a dispel for yourself to get rid of the negative effects of her abilities, and you can just hit her until she dies. She's very, very fragile, and she's already used to the idea of dying a dozen times every single game. Items that either dispel or grant status resistance, like Sanchin Yasha, Satanic, Manta-style BKB, etc., are all quite useful, as are heroes that can gain status resistance, like Slardar and Spirit Breaker. Once you can deal with her spells, the only thing left is to deal with that incredibly pathetic HP bar. Lastly, if you find yourself going up against an evil baby, you can go for BKB piercing stuns. Basher and Abyssal Blade are the obvious ones, but plenty of heroes have ways of piercing BKB as well. If you don't have access to those things, there's always the tried and true method of hitting her until she dies. In conclusion, Crystal Maiden is a very stressful hero, and you should absolutely play her. If your team plays badly, take revenge on them by ERPing with the enemy mid lane in the post-game chat. Peace on planet Earth.